thank you anyway for coming along, and between Bethany and myself, we're just going to have more of a casual conversation, so we'll just keep that open to the floor and you can ask us questions as we go. So my name's Nuala Kilmartin and I'm part of Innovate UK, and I sit in the digital and technology domain, and the past 5 years I've been specifically working on Digital Security by Design Challenge. So I want to tell you a little bit about that, maybe take you through basically the business case, where it came from, how it got off the ground, who was involved, and move you through basically where we are today. But just before I do that, I'm just going to introduce Bethany.
Hi everyone, I'm Beth Foster. I'm the innovation lead for the energy systems part of Innovate UK. So I'm here today because although my focus is not specifically digital innovation, it's a large part of what we do in the energy sector. One, to improve resilience of the energy sector, but also to help transition us to net zero. So a lot of that work is about sustainability, sustainable engineering, but also my background in engineering is very much large critical national infrastructure. Pipelines as big as this room that you could walk down, right? So for me, it's very interesting to be at a conference like this, because a lot of the innovation you're doing is, you can't see it, you can't walk through it. It's on the laptop, and actually some of the biggest innovations and transformations that are going to take us towards net zero are actually digital and software related. So the fund that I work in is called the Strategic Innovation Fund. It's a £450 million fund governed by the Office of Gas and Electricity Markets. And I'm going to talk a little bit later today about the insights we've gained from some of the digital innovation projects that we've funded, and what's needed for the future and to get us towards 2050.
Great, thank you, Beth. So just to maybe set some context, for those that may not necessarily be aware of UKRI, we are the largest UK innovation agency, and Innovate UK sits within UKRI with the other 8 research councils. So we work across UKRI, specifically in the DSBD challenge that I'm referring to, Digital Security by Design. So the reason for that is because we have brought EPSRC on board. That's the Engineering Physical Science Research Council, as well as ESRC, which is the Economic Research Council, Social Science. So the reason that they're involved is because rather than just go totally deep tech, we also brought in the human behaviour aspect in terms of what does it mean to be safe online. So fast forward to today, we've been involved in this project 5 years, so we now have outputs and evidence in terms of the research that ESRC have done in relation to barriers to adoption, regulation, legislation, and futures as well. What does it look like in 2030, 2035 in terms of if we've actually done what we said we were going to do? Then that's very interesting wind up. So we'll be able to tell you a little bit more about our showcase, whereby we're going to evidence some of this impact, which is on the 11th of February. So I'll rewind later and tell you a little bit about that. So initially, what actually happened in 2018 was government went to industry to say, how can we help these global challenges? And this was the Industrial Strategy Challenge Fund. So ISCF, you would have been maybe familiar with. So in 2018, Innovate UK had obviously huge relationships with many industry collaborators, and a case was developed with ARM, who are beside ourselves in the foyer here exhibiting. And this was because there was a concept known now as the Morello programme, whereby ARM were going to look at the design of a prototype Morello board to look at embedding the chip which actually houses Cambridge University's CHERI software architecture. Just actually, show of hands, has anybody here heard of, well obviously we've got low risk in the room with us, so you might have heard a little bit earlier about CHERI, and I know you're going to hear plenty more later as well, so I'll not go too deep on that one then, but initially what happened is this collaboration came from ARM and Cambridge University as a consortium. Edinburgh and Lenaro would also be involved there. So it's £70 million of government funding, together with match funding from key industry partners of over 120 million. So it's a huge challenge to keep the world safe online. So huge objective. So what actually happened then was the production of the Morello board in 2019, 2020. So, working during these COVID times, difficult to get chip components during COVID, as you can imagine. But ARM were fortunate enough to produce over I think 600 of the Morello boards that we were able to give out globally to not just SMEs across the UK, but even globally. So we were giving these Morello boards out to those who had specific requests in terms of what they're going to do with exploiting the technology. So they did go outside of the UK, specifically if they could add value to the ecosystem, if there was an industry consortium. However, we're really looking at keeping the skill set within the UK in terms of sovereign and talent pipeline, etc. So one of the key objectives of the challenge would be to enhance curriculum and look at how you would work with universities for SciBoc, for example, looking at a CHERI module. So as well as, because it's kind of split among 3 strand activities, so as well as the deployment of the ARM prototype board, we also worked with consortiums across the UK of university PIs with industry partners, heavily, 100% funded by ESPRC. And these 4-year programmes, we're really looking at, again, addressing specific elements of the capabilities of the CHERI architecture. So CHERI has been around for over 10 years. The research is not new. However, they needed that injection of funding to get back off the ground and to look at commercialisation, adoption and diffusion. So the academic partnerships that we had, these consortiums, have really worked in terms of exploiting the capabilities. And we're actually, throughout the past couple of years, obviously checking a lot of challenges in terms of even post-COVID trying to secure resource within the universities, but also now we're at the stage of trying to look at their white papers, the blogs, any artefacts that they have in relation to their findings. So that's kind of what we're going to be doing, moving towards this showcase where we're basically showcasing the CHERI capabilities. A third activity strand that was important, that was running alongside, was also the Technology Access programme. So Digital Catapult ran this programme for ourselves across the UK. We initially had 1 or 2 cohorts up and running of SMEs who would have received a Morello board and that hand-holding about how to look at exploiting the technology. We're actually now at cohort 6, so we've done well, not envisaging that we would get to cohort 6. So again, we've been fortunate that as we've gone through the programme, cohort 6 actually came to light that we secured funding for low risk to come on board. So I know you'll hear a little bit more about that and how the Sonata board has, with risk 5 approach, so these SMEs in the UK in cohort 6 are actually looking at the CHERI architecture on the Sonata board. So maybe you'll talk a little bit more about that later. So, I mean, this is not just deep tech. This is looking at specifically an awareness programme, moving into a knowledge kind of phase, engagement phase, and then moving towards creating a demand, advocating champions. So there's no good us as UK government standing up and say that this works. This was really about finding, those industrial use cases so we could prove in terms of the capabilities of the CHERI architecture, whether this would be increased productivity, performance, low cost savings, etc. And obviously the push for cost savings with the increase in talent. But also this is very much looking at how this collaboration, this ecosystem came about. So this very, very strong, robust ecosystem of government, industry and academia coming together twice a year to really flesh out what could this look like, what does success look like, what potential use cases do we need to show, because don't forget this is a prototype before actual commercialisation. And so what we looked at here was taking some sectors that we know would be faster adoption, telecoms for instance. We did have an e-commerce project, the Hut Group were on board based in Manchester, and because they were actually looking at the CHERI capabilities in their e-commerce platforms, and we have that as a live use case. But we also held a couple of roundtables with specific industry sectors, such as telecoms, I mentioned, energy resilience, and automotive telematics. So the point here really was to get those organisations, like from the automotive industry, like ACN, Beam Connectivity, working with Rolls-Royce, working with Thales, get them in a room, understand what their pain points are and how we could address those pain points. So for me, my role would be obviously looking at the narrative. What are the commercial personas that we have? How do we, look at the use cases and the audience that we have? How do we get them to sit up and to help champion the need for this? So we had various different round tables with even the energy sector, and the energy catapult would have come on board, and we're working with Scottish Gas Networks and a few of the larger organisations and Ofgem. And so the whole point, and it's very highly focused, is obviously critical national infrastructure. This is a huge issue with the growth of cyber attacks, and understanding that this is about foundational technology. This is about very specifically secure by design, secure by default principles, because if it's not baked in at the start, it's not going to be necessarily secure. So the whole point, obviously, of what the CHERI architecture can do is block up to 70% of the vulnerabilities in hardware. So this is phenomenal, certainly in terms of what memory safety can prove. And the CHERI architecture, and I know you'll go into a little bit more detail, looks at, it's twofold in terms of compartmentalisation and memory safety. So obviously, you're always going to have 30% legacy code issues, but if we can stand over the fact that CHERI can block 70% of the vulnerabilities, then you ask yourself, would CrowdStrike happen, for instance? If had CHERI built in. So we've come a long way in the past 5 years, and we have collated the research. We've had many showcases from Digital Catapult Technology Access Programme, but also moving forward, as I mentioned earlier, with the Describe Hub is the social science aspect. So we have collated a lot of research from the social side, science side of the programme, and I mean that has value in itself. But we work alongside DCIT, and we're very close to Cabinet Office and Parliament in terms of trying to champion the need for this. So this is about getting industry to sit up to say, in the future, all products and services should have CHERI, should be CHERI enabled. So going forward, we're obviously working across the supply chain and working with RegTech and procurement and looking at how this can happen. So this is about fixing the foundations. So that it's costly, obviously, to go back to retrofit, but if we can champion the need for this now by these live mission-driven use cases, that we have Mr. Rolls-Royce standing up saying that this is, and there's a need for this, or from an autonomous cars point of view, I mean the use case really is you're not safe unless you're secure. You're not secure unless you're safe. So I mean ultimately, it's these use cases now we need to really showcase these benefits and this impact that we're talking about. So on the 11th of February next week, actually in locally in Westminster, we have a showcase where we're bringing together 43 different exhibitors who are there to showcase their demonstrations in terms of Morello and CHERI and the Sonata board. And we're looking obviously at commercialisation here. So we do and we have now actively moved the needle in terms of commercialisation diffusion, whereby we have Codasip on board who have come out and SciSemi, SciQuai, you know, so we're starting to move the needle, certainly in terms of getting organisations to set up to understand that this needs to happen. And, you know, the stronger we are in terms of the sharing of the knowledge and the impact and the use cases, then we're definitely getting there. So rather than me keep going, I'm going to let Beth come in here and then I'll come back and tell you a little bit more about what's next and what's our planning, just to keep you on alert. Thank you.
Thank you. There's so many interesting points I could pick up in that conversation, but the word that sticks out to me from an energy systems perspective is, it is safe. What does it mean to be digitally safe? Take the energy sector. You know, actually, I'm going to ask you guys, what does it mean for you guys, whether you're in the energy sector or not, what does it mean for you to be digitally safe? What are the indicators that tell you you're digitally safe?
Build a big wall, right?
Build a big wall, yeah.
And then
And that's how people perceived safety when the energy systems were built in the UK back in the 70s. Is, okay, if we decentralize everything, we build big walls around it, physical walls, literally physical walls, we disconnect it from other control systems, then, okay, if one asset gets attacked, the rest of the country is safe. But actually, if we want to move to a decarbonized power system, we need flexibility, right? We need flexibility within our energy systems. How do we get flexibility? Data. We need to understand what people are doing with their data, how they're using it, how they're using different energy sources. How do we get people's data? Well, we need to connect systems, right? So then we're stuck in this paradox of, okay, are we compromising our safety by giving people flexibility? How do we manage this if we're going to reach net zero? And if anyone's interested in the energy sector, and particularly in the way net zero is going, if you read the Clean Power 2030 ambition that was published by the government just a couple of months ago, they've said that 95% of our generation in the UK needs to come from renewable sources or low carbon sources. What are our low carbon sources in the UK? Hydropower, offshore wind, solar. Is it constant? Is it dispatchable? Can we take it whenever we want? No. So we need to understand what these generation patterns are going to look like. And if we need to be sure that we're going to get 95% of our generation from these sources at all times, we need safety, we need security, we need resilience. So it all comes back round. It's almost like this constant roundabout of how do we manage this. So let's translate that into an innovation perspective. First of all, we need to understand what the parameters are that we're innovating in. So what are the indicators that show that we're safe? So we can do a lot of work on encryption, we can do a lot of work on gosh, I'm not even a data science expert, but you know, some of these digital cybersecurity things we can implement, firewalls, all that kind of stuff. Fantastic. But then how do we know it's going to work against future threats? What are the future threats? Can you quantify them? Okay, now imagine yourself being an innovator and you're writing a proposal to get a grant. If I don't know what the future threats are, how can I quantify them? How can I then take that to an investor and show that my solution is going to return XYZ amount of funding in 10 years' time? How do you do that, right? It's such a difficult thing to do, which is why at Innovate UK, particularly from an energy perspective, I want innovators, data scientists from other industries who've done a lot of this work already to help us understand what future threats could be. So one project I've got at the moment is called future security in a quantum world. So they're actually trying to quantify what future quantum threats could be and the impact that would be on an energy network. And I'll show you how they do this. So imagine you have a cyber threat on a power station. That results in a power outage of 10 minutes. You then map all the connected industries to that particular part of the network, and you find out what is the financial or societal impact of those going out for 10 minutes. You then translate that into a financial cost into the local area, and then you then translate that back to the impact on bill payers. Very, very complex modeling exercise, but those are the kind of exercises, that's the kind of complexity we've seen in the financial sector, for example. We need experts from other sectors to come in to help us make a resilient future, and that's how we're trying to build some of our programs, and that's how we're trying to think about digital complexity and safeties in industries that have typically shied away from that kind of stuff. There are a lot of parallels to transport. For example, they were very digitally averse for a long time, and it's only recently, particularly with new charging infrastructure, that we need a lot more data and a lot more interconnectedness than we previously had. But anyway, I can feel myself starting to go on a tangent now, and I could talk about this forever. But what I want you to take away from this is, what are the indicators that show we're digitally safe? Can you translate that into a framework? And if you can, then there is ample funding opportunities for you at Innovate UK.
Oh, that's an appetite. So you say that, however, if you're aware of Innovate UK funding landscape, it is not easy. And we know at the moment we have paused our smart grant applications because we're totally inundated, basically, and only maybe 3% of those applications are funded. So there is a need for more hand-holding, there's a need for more support for SMEs and startups and scale-ups in order to get that kind of objective setting, maybe aligned to government initiatives and missions, so that, like I say, the way the Industrial Challenge Fund started with the business case. So rather than having such a pool of all applications going in, they're breaking that down. So obviously there's a wealth of different competitions and funding that goes on right across the organisation, depending on whatever sector you're in. We have a standout here, so even after the session, come chat to us. We can certainly look at hopefully some educated signposting in terms of who you might need to speak to. But also, just to rewind, we know from a cyber point of view, attacks are on the rise, and it's not going to stop. So what are we going to do about it? And at least the likes of the Digital Technology Challenge is addressing some of and working, because it is a government-backed initiative. So we have proven that we have broken a market failure that existed from the 1970s. So hardware security didn't exist. And if we have done what we said we were going to do, then there's less need for software patching in the future. So, like I say, you're always going to have your legacy issues. However, what we're trying to prove here now going forward is exactly what you're saying, Beth. It's about trust and resilience, and ultimately about safety, and critical national infrastructure is the best place to start when you think about what could actually happen. So what we're waiting on in the spending review right now, we had bids and proposals put in relation to the spending review, and we're kind of at that stage waiting to hear from DCIT in terms of what we do now. We've built an ecosystem of over 1,000 collaborators coming together wanting to address this issue. You can't just pull the plug, dsbd.tech, pull the plug, bye, that was great. It's taxpayers' money, what are we going to do about it now? So the whole concept here now is, okay, that was good, that's addressing objectives, but what's next? Why do they care? Why should they care? How did they get involved? So the messaging is very much now moving towards a managed deployment, certainly looking not just critical national infrastructure, but there's 3 different elements of this. One, you want to keep the lights on in the ecosystem. We call this, there's a lifeboat scenario. What does the lifeboat look like to keep this ecosystem warm? Because there's a lot of good work coming out, and even the previous SMEs who got involved in different competitions back in Digital Catapult Technology Access, they still want to be involved in this ecosystem, and they're still coming along trying to find out what can they do. It's not just about the funding, obviously, from an academics point of view and research, they want to look at the commercialisation of the research. So aside from what we do here, we're always encouraging a pipeline of talent. Like I did mention, that working with postdocs and PhDs, that we've got a CHERI module, we've created jobs, we have a huge wealth of benefits that we can actually stand over from this challenge, but also looking specifically at even encouraging from a cyber point of view, startups, and we have other programs in the mix. If you've ever heard of Cyber ASAP, it's a cyber accelerator bootcamp program where we are recruiting for startups within universities. So they must be associated with the university. This is a 2-phase program. It's live at the moment. So phase 1 is the applicants of the to the competition can receive up to £32,000 to look at market validation and proof of concept of a cyber service or product. Do go on to ukri.org and look up Cyber ASAP if you're interested. Competition's open for another week, and I know we've got 84 applications already there. So that's exciting, because this is about a pipeline of startups and scale-ups looking at addressing these cyber challenges, because that could be anything coming from IoT, VPNs, right across the board from a tech perspective. And pre-Cyber ASAP, we have Pathfinders, which is another kind of whet the appetite within the universities and among researchers to look at actually conceptualization of a startup. So we are getting out there. We are talking to schools, like doing cyber hackathons. Obviously, there's Women in Code. There's so many different concepts that we are touching, that we are supporting DCIT with. But also, this leads on to the likes of the Digital Security by Design Challenge, but now ultimately the next stage of this managed deployment. What does this look like? What's involved? If we do secure money for 2025-26, then under the spending review, you want that to continue. So, we want to really make a difference to these UK sovereign missions as well. So, but this is more of a global challenge, and we're fortunate to say that, we've been in the White House, we've been able to not just get a mention, but be very active in the UK cyber strategy and the semiconductor strategy. So, we are not sitting on the shelf. This is actually in delivery, and to be very proud to be involved, but also there's many opportunities to get involved. It's not just getting a Sonata board or Morello board. I mean, there's we started with software engineers, software architects. We went up to speak to CTOs. CEOs have to understand, why is this important? What does this mean for our organisation? So, the journey that we've been on, from awareness to engagement to onboarding our advocates with MOD, DSDL. I mean, like I say, we're right across every sector. So it's I'm looking forward to next week, actually, to see the fruits of the merit in terms of the collaboration that and how far we've come. But it's all about where we go to next, which is another part of UKRI, which is a wider cross-council building a more secure world. So we are now part of building a more secure world. And I'm just working on our application for Cyber UK in Manchester now in May. So I'm looking forward to getting that off the ground. And we're obviously going bigger and better. So I'm going to hand you back.
Thank you. We've got about 5 or 6 minutes left. And I was going to open up the floor for anyone who has any questions about what we've spoken about, the kind of support that we offer at Innovate UK. We've only spoken about 2 programs, really. But there's thousands of us innovation leads who, I say thousands, maybe a few hundred, who run different programs for all sorts of different things. So I think there's a roaming mic at the back there. Please feel free to jump in. If not, we can keep rambling, whatever suits you. Any questions? Yeah?
First of all, so I'm from Low Risk, and we really appreciate all the support that we've gotten from Innovate UK. So you mentioned a little bit about Cohort 6 and the February 11th event that we're having. So that's going to showcase a lot of the things that we've achieved. What do you envision will happen after that point, and also give a little bit of a glimpse of what we'll see on February 11th?
Thank you. Yes, it's really an exciting opportunity to bring those demonstrators to the floor, whereby we have industry, we have externals to the ecosystem who maybe not have been aware of what's been going on. So we have industry, we have press, we have investors, and obviously government all coming along. I know we have over 300 coming along and 43 exhibitors. And I mean, we've every Microsoft, Google, HP, TALUS, but all the SMEs from the alumni as well. So this is about showcasing the impact in terms of their sector and that cross-sector approach, but also, yes, the question is, well, what happens now? So we will have some keynotes and announcements in terms of the funding and what's next, like I say, about supporting the ongoing activities of the ecosystem and moving forward with this managed deployment. So we have that in operation now with a forthcoming roundtable. And we've got a mix of representatives from across all the utilities coming along to that. So we need to address, first of all, back to what are the pain points, what are we not talked about, what do we need to address, and why care, why now, etc. So there's a lot of legwork to do to the next stage, but we will have a competition once we have the announcement of securing that funding. We will have a competition probably opening early autumn, and that'll be specifically around some of those engineering projects, and where we go to then from 26 to 29, hopefully in the second round of the spending review. So you'll not be going too far. Thank you.
Just on that competitions opening, if you are interested in what's happening with the energy sector stuff, we have a competition opening in April and it'll be closing in May. But prior to that, if you're completely new to the energy sector and you want to find out what the problem statements are, how you can find out more about the industry, we'll be running webinars from March through to May in the run-up to that competition. So if you're brand new, please sign up to the SIF newsletter. If you just type in Ofgem Strategic Innovation Fund on Google, it will come up with Ofgem's website and you can sign up to the newsletter there, and all the details and events, funding opportunities will come up there. Do you have a sign-up page as well?
We would have, at the moment, it's still live with dsbd.tech, so we would have had the opportunity to get a Sonata board or Morello board on the website, but we know you can go to Miser from a commercial point of view. The Morello boards, we are now moving towards looking at a virtual remote lab, which will be housed in Cambridge University, so there will be that kind of virtual emulator opportunity through maybe more of a knowledge hub that we'll be looking at. So the activity and the hand-holding will still exist. And obviously it's all open source in terms of the repositories and that from the technical support. Other than that, it would be ukri.org /digital security by design, or Cyber ISAP, or even our digital technology domain, because there's live programs with Bridge AI, with digital twin, with quantum computing. So certainly just it's ear to the ground, get out there, talk to us, find out what's happening, whether you're an SME, an academic, or a startup. So there's plenty for everybody. It's just trying to navigate who you need to speak to.
Super. Any more questions? Yeah, go for it. Can't guarantee that I'll be able to answer it though.
How
Yeah,
does
government R&D.
How does GCHQ square up being that cybersecurity, we must make everything secure, with we need to spy on everybody and we need to be able to break into everything? Do you have the inside secret behind that contradiction?
Good question. I can offer some insights on how we operate from an energy systems point of view. So if we feel that there is a threat to cybersecurity, or we feel like that they should be informed, we have direct communications with the National Cybersecurity Centre. So we go through them, and it would be their responsibility to inform GCHQ if they felt it was necessary. But the energy networks are so heavily regulated that any innovation application, there's very little threat that there would be malicious activity within an application or within a project proposal. And if there was, there are so many mechanisms in place for us to inform central government or NCSC or GCHQ if we thought that was the case, and it would not get funded before without being thoroughly vetted. And if it was a particularly risky project, but NCSC or GCHQ felt that it needed to be done, they would take that project and they would run with it with their own internal mechanisms, which we know nothing about.
I mean, it's the same, obviously, if there was requests coming in from certain parts of the world that we were not going to give a Morello board to. Any requests like that would have gone to our advisory group from an international point of view to decide. So there is that collaborative decision-making in terms of following protocols, let's say. So, and likewise, working alongside NCSC and DCIT, keeping us aligned in terms of sovereign imperatives. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. Our relations at Innovate UK with government bodies, relevant agencies and institutions are so strong that the risk of anything, of any of the activities that you mentioned is very low, and they should be taken care of. Cool. I think we're on time pretty much. Super. Thank you so much for coming.
Okay. Thank you all.